You have to look at your organization from the lens of someone else, not what you think you are. Days are gone when brand names really used to make so much of difference. Organizations like Tata's, Birlas and all had a lot of impact in terms of what organization you're working for. The fact that you join and you retire a company, that kind of mindset. But things have changed today. Today, startups have been able to hire the best of the talent because they're giving experience, exposure, and the money. Closest to my heart has been my 10-year stint with Tata's. Very interesting. I saw the company from Tata Tea to Tata Global Beverages, and then on the verge, it was becoming Tata Consumer Products. It was very interesting because there, I was one of the youngest vice president at that point of time. Perspectives are very different. I was more working with people who were very, very experienced. Starbucks was an immense learning, and I remember the first time. What's the irony is that we met for the first meeting of Starbucks at Cafe Coffee Day.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a Bandra Cafe Coffee Day. And
near my house, closest.
Yeah, and we were talking. I hadn't spoken to Priyanka before that, and I didn't know that was the meeting where she was all planning to dump the entire work on me in terms of now going forward, you are taking it over.
You have to take this over.
So very interesting. My founder, Deepak Singh, first time when I met him, he was having Himalayan. I was elated, like you have left Tata, but Himalayan, Tetley and Starbucks, they're still closer to your heart, and whenever you see anywhere, you end up feeling good that someone is taking a Tata product. It's not always that today you expect a person to join and retire. But the kind of emotions that are attached with the organization are very important. In most of the traditional organizations, HR is supposed to be a very, very contextual, sensitive function where you end up talking about in shades of grey. Most of the thing you'll never give a straight answer. As a tech company, work from home, hybrid is the reality. If you're talking of building a culture, if you're talking about building an organization into an institution, and you're talking about employee growth, how can this happen when learning and collaboration is not happening?
Hi, welcome to Office Tales and People podcast. We have a new guest today. We have with us Nitin Nahata, who's the CHRO of Gamescraft. Let me tell you a little bit about Nitin. So Nitin, I have known him for about 15 years now. One of the first things we worked on together was the Starbucks project, when Tatas were getting Starbucks into India. And that's the first time I interacted with him. Of course, I've also worked with him in Tata Global Beverages, where he was in HR and I was doing business excellence. We both did global roles there. Very experienced professional in HR, I must say.
Awesome.
Before, Tata's, he's worked with HSBC, Standard Chartered, so a very good mix of banking, FMCG, and now, of course, startups. He's done Udaan as well as Gamescraft.
Awesome. So we will have lots of masala to talk about.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome.
You tell me which one. Banking? You want FMCG? You want startup?
I'm gonna ask too many questions then.
So let's have fun together.
Yes, let's start.
Welcome on the show, Nitin.
Thanks.
We're very honored to have you with us today.
Same here.
So the first one, Nitin, I want to know from you. You have such great experience in banking, Stancy, Tata's. How has all of these experiences influenced you and your approach to HR, as well as how to build organization culture?
Very fortunate I am, in terms of many a times you have to plan. Some of these things were planned and some happened on their own. My experience with Standard Chartered and HSBC gave me a lot understanding about global organizations and banking, because banking at that time was at peak and I was being hired to set up a startup within a banking sector, Standard Chartered, which was quite unique because some of the challenges we face today with limited talent and resources, you have to scale up a big organization. That's something that I learned there. And then I moved to HSBC, which again was a very different setup because HSBC and Stancy, from a cultural standpoint, both London-based organizations, very different when it comes to their mindset. Stancy is far more Asia specific, and HSBC is more global in terms of London-based, and their perspective about their own self is very different. So I remember when I used to hire for HSBC, like, people should join us because we are HSBC. Man, the world has changed, because today people are looking for options and brand itself don't get you people. And that mindset in terms of how do you navigate leadership, because I was also managing talent acquisition there. Very interesting, and that actually made me learn a lot in terms of when you are in the, buyer's market.
So what's that one learning that you think really, you took from there and used it for the rest of your
Absolutely,
journey?
absolutely. Because one of the things that I learned there is that you have to look at your organization from the lens of someone else, not what you think you are, because
Awesome.
when you're actually in today's world, when you're trying to hire talent, I mean, days are gone when brand names really used to make us so much of difference. Earlier, I remember when I was growing up and all, or organizations like Tata's and organizations like Builders and all had a lot of impact in terms of what organization you're working for. The fact that you join and you retire a company, that kind of mindset. You can't be changing your job so quickly and so frequently. But things have changed today. Today, startups have been able to hire the best of the talent because they're giving experience, exposure, and the money. So I think a lot has changed in the talent market, and one as an individual has to learn how they're navigating the realities there. So I think that was interesting, and I think closest to my heart has been my 10-year stint with Tata's. Very interesting. I saw the company from Tata Tea to Tata Global Beverages, and then on the verge, it was becoming Tata Consumer Products, right? And you were there where you had seen a lot of change in the leadership. I mean, it was very interesting because there, I think I was one of the youngest in terms of vice president at that point of time, and perspectives are very different. I was more working with people who were very, very experienced. So very interesting. That actually taught me a lot in terms of how do you really, balance between experience and what the new world age things require, and how do you navigate, because sometimes when you have taking a proposal which is very different, and it's going to ask a lot of how do you actually put it across, how do you get perspectives, and you get convincing responses. Very, very important. And I think Priyanka was talking about Starbucks. I think Starbucks was an immense learning, and I remember the first time. What's the irony is that we met for the first meeting of Starbucks at Cafe Coffee Day.
Oh,
Yeah, it was a Bandra Cafe Coffee Day, and we
Near my
met there.
house, closest.
Yeah, and we were talking. I hadn't spoken to Priyanka before that, and I think I got a call from Nalin saying that why don't you and Priyanka meet? And I never knew. Okay, Priyanka was. I was thinking I'm just going to work with her and all that. But I didn't know that was the meeting where she was all planning to dump the entire work on me in terms of now going forward, you are
You
taking
have
it
to
over.
take this over.
So,
Yeah.
so very interesting because a lot of people were involved. Hong Kong office was involved. Tata Group, in terms of Mr. R.K. Krishna Kumar was involved. And, Mr. R.K. had a very different persona altogether,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And Avni was involved from his team. So I had heard all stories about Mr. RKK, how he is very particular about the people aspect of the business, and it goes in depth. And you only have 2 minutes to make or break in terms of what you have to say. And I had no understanding about QSR at that point of time. And I get a call from Tata Global Beverages. Next to next week, you are in London presenting to the Starbucks office in terms of how are you going to be having the HR startup, framework for Tata Starbucks. I was like, okay. So I'm now trying to do the all study in terms of where, and I don't know because QSR is a very different sector as
Yeah.
compared to FMCG and all of that stuff. But that was again a learning for me in terms of when you don't know anything about a sector, how do you really start? So what I did, I spoke to a particular dear friend who had started a boutique research firm, recruitment firm, and look, I want to understand QSR. I don't have money to give you right now. What I can do is that whenever we are hiring talent for this company, you will be the first one whom we'll get in touch with. So I basically said, okay, what are typical things there in a QSR in terms of operations, real estate, customer service, HR, and all of. I started interviewing people from various QSRs, Devyani International, and all. It gave a lot of perspective, and that time I really understood how the sector really goes, and what are some of the key drivers of this. And one of the very interesting topic there was that uh, getting the right store becomes
Yeah.
very
The
important. And I
location.
think Priyanka, because she was at that point of time with Chroma,
Chroma.
also spoke about it to me. I understood, okay, if something has to change for Tata Starbucks, it's customer service and real estate. So we really worked in terms of how they are going to be differentiating, created an entire model presentation and
So
went
what
and
was the
present.
first location for?
Uh,
Yeah, so Shikha, it's very interesting. The first location was actually a Chroma location.
Oh,
We had a big store in Fountain,
okay.
in Elphiston building
In Bombay.
in Bombay,
Yeah.
and it was a prime property, and we actually gave them half our space. It's an awesome one, and there used to be a line.
Is it still there?
It's still there. It's one of the, most premium property that they
Okay.
have. And there used to be a line in the beginning.
Hmm.
But what I want to hear from you, Nitin, and I want you to talk to the audience about is from culture, building an organization culture. You said Tata's 10 years. What is it that you've learned from there, which you carry with you in your approach even today?
I think there's a lot, in terms of whatever learnings that have happened and whatever wisdom you have got in terms of how do you sustainably look at organization, institutional is from Tata's because it comes very handy, especially in the startup world, where while in the name of agility we do a lot of stuff, but very often the culture part that holds an organization together, that in tough times is very important. I think great learnings from this. When I, as a HR leader, I'm looking at how do you build a culture. The very fact that we call ourselves Gamescraft and employees as crafters is a very unique thing that I learned in terms of how you create a culture where it looks. I'm not saying that we are creating a family out here, but we are creating a culture where you are part of the ecosystem and play an important role out there. How do you create that identity becomes very important.
So, Nitin, I have a question here that's coming in my mind that if you were to tell CHROs that one specific culture aspect they must really focus on, what should be that one thing in culture that every HR leader in an organization should focus on?
Look at people beyond their role. Okay, when I talk about it, it's a simple thing that we all are humans, and at the end of the day, we all have ups and downs. How are we really looking at focusing on the strength and considering leveraging that? Now, I'll give you a very simple example. I mean, we as an organization, from a regulatory framework in the last 1.5 years, there's been a lot of turmoil. Uh, a lot has been written in the media. There are a lot of people who wrote the industry is going to end, the sector is going to be coming to a collapse, etc. But the point is that many companies use this as an opportunity of rationalizing people and all of that stuff. I think we took a very different approach. It's very difficult for you to get good talent. Even if you hire a good talent, how do you make sure that they understand the cultural nuances, the working culture of the in the organization, and become productive? We just can't let any good talent go. I think we'll have to find ways in terms of how are we going to be positively and employing them, right, and keeping them engaged. So we as an organization at that point of time looked at various other opportunities that were available, which were expanding beyond the realm that we are working on, and I think that worked very well for us. Because today the kind of regulatory environment we are, where a lot of challenges that are out there, I don't think we have had any problem or anxiety among people in terms of what's going to happen to me, right? That's because there is a lot of psychological safety
Correct.
that is there for the people, that if I'm a good performer, I'm not worried, right? Uh, Talk about anything else in terms of my manager not being good or I'm not in the good books of manager are some of the things that least bother employer or crafter out here. I think that's very important because those are the times when credibility and the culture gets built. One of the important things that I talk about culture, you have a strong culture when leader adapts and the outcomes of an organization in terms of good or bad times are defined by the culture. There's some kind of predictability. Very often we say,
Very nice.
Tata's may
Yeah.
it wouldn't happen like this. Tata's will take care. Similarly, today when we talk about startups becoming an institution, it's very important that there's some kind of predictability you get into the outcomes. It's not defined that if Priyanka is the leader or Nitin is the leader in a particular company, will the outcomes be different? Yes, choices can be different, but the directional spirit of the questions cannot differ, and that's what is the predictability and the consistency, because that's what we call as culture. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what becomes very important. So when I look at startups and when I look at Gamescraft, my thought is, are we able to build that institution, and Tata becomes the North Star out there in terms of what they have built. Even today, I think when Ratan Tata, we lost a gem, you would see there was so much in the media, so much was there
I
everywhere.
personally, in spite of not being directly linked to Tatas, only as they are my clients, but I really felt that I've lost something, my like personal loss, and
Yeah.
I really felt that somebody I loved, and we've lost him, and that was his charisma, I think.
What was amazing to see, Shikha, is you look at LinkedIn, you look at Twitter, everyone had a personal story with him.
I know.
A personal equation, a personal photograph, a personal story to tell.
Yeah.
I think that is leadership. You don't get leaders like that
Yeah,
anymore,
yeah,
where
I
they have
totally
a
agree.
personal touch with every person they have interacted with,
He was, I think,
The
one of
difference.
its
One
own
of
kind,
kind,
you know.
Yeah.
I was not happy down for 1 or 2 days,
Yeah,
and I
you
think I
feel
did
that.
message to Priyanka at that point of time, in terms of we have lost, and there was something about it. Even today, when I talk about, in fact, it's very interesting, my founder, Deepak Singh Elawat, first time when I met him, he was having Himalayan. I was elated, like you have left Tata, but Himalayan, Tetley, and Starbucks, they're still closer to your heart. And whenever you see anywhere, you end up feeling good that someone is taking a Tata product. That's very important, and that's the kind of connect. Because if you have a great culture, it's not always that today you expect a person to join and retire.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
kind of emotions that are attached with the organization are very important, and I think that still stays close in my heart. Like we were just talking right now. Are you are here? How come we have a Wagh Bakri store down there? I said, look, that's not in my control because I don't own
We already
Prestige.
discussed how she's going to pull you for that.
Pointed out, see where my influence is. He had a Tetley box.
We only have Tetley.
Yeah.
At the corner
So
singing.
that's very
Where I have
important.
influence, see, there's Tetley.
I think that's culture.
That's very good.
That's culture. Even when you carry forward that emotion of a product that comes from a brand that you've really, really
Worked
connected
with,
with or worked with, I think that's the real culture.
So, now that we've spoken about culture, you also spoke about crafters and you've been quoting that. I know you're a pro at creating HR branding, right? I know you since Tata Global Beverages and all the brands you created over there. Tell me how important, or tell our viewers how important is HR branding? Why should we do it? How does it help?
I think it's one of the most important element because very often branding is connected with marketing. But let's understand, our employees are our internal customers, and I think it becomes very important that whenever we are doing any kind of initiative or intervention, people have to first feel it's very contextual and very relevant to them. How do you end up creating relevance there, right? And that comes when they look at it's being connected to them, right? In Gamescraft, when we talk about, like, we have our employee engagement survey, which we call as bingo. Bingo, while it's a sports term, but it's also in terms of bang on, in terms of to the point. And we end up creating a brand out of it and what's happening there, that becomes very important. That one, it's relevant to the sector. Second, it's relevant to the organization, and it means what people want to say. Because Gamescraft, from a cultural standpoint, is very, and startups in terms of very to the point. Like, one of the things that I've learned, if I have to talk about here, is that I had to unlearn a lot from Tata's in terms of setting the context in mails and writing long mails, to here in terms of, that's fine, Nitin. Can you just complete in 2 minutes what you want to say? We understand all of that. So that learning has been there for me. So that is in terms of bingo. Be sharp, be focused, and straight to the point. We have done that. Like our 5th year anniversary, 6th year anniversary, like we said, there has to be something about it, in terms of festivity, in terms of celebrations, and we call it Crafters Carnival. So all of these things is creating an ecosystem in terms of, as an organization, I have created an ecosystem where throughout the year we have activities, events that are happening, Crafters Premier League. Now, all of these things that we have created, which again are brands, but is very specific and contextual to Gamescraft.
Right.
And people feel, okay, as crafters, there's a very, very special saying that if anything has to be called in Gamescraft, it has to start with K,
Crafters.
right? Because there's no connection, there's K wala connection and everything. So, that's very interesting because it ends up creating some kind of uniqueness to the way you talk, the way you indulge, or the way you look at things. That becomes very important, and that becomes a part of culture, and you create something that's very unique. Because connection with the K, people will say there's a spelling mistake, but in Gamescraft, no. That's because we are crafters.
It's intentional.
Yeah. So that becomes very important
So
in
you're
terms of
saying that internal branding really helps people to connect with that specific brand name or something that you've internally come up with. People will start really connecting with that brand, and they will always remember it, and they will also value it more than outsiders, and they will sort of have that personal connect even with their peers,
Absolutely.
right?
So what happens, Shikha, is mostly otherwise it looks like another HR exercise. You know that HR, okay, HR has this list of things to do, and I've ticked the box. Okay, I have a employee survey, engagement survey, I have a R&R, and I have HR normally gets stuck in all of that. But when you brand it, it sort of becomes personal to them. What I want to know from you is, traditional organizations versus startups. You've done both. So what is it that traditional organizations can learn from startups?
agility. I think the
Agility.
speed of execution, and I think one of the things is quite clear. Like today, when you talk about traditional organizations, they talk about a growth at a certain level, and when you look at the our annual operating plan in startups, probably what some of these companies are trying to achieve in a year or 2 years is something that they are trying to achieve in a quarter. And when you are looking at it, you have to think very differently. You have to be very agile, you have to innovate. More importantly, you have to learn to fail fast. Right, you have to learn to fail fast and then look at what next you can do. Probably you will not have 100% confidence or data to prove that this is going to work and this is not going to work, but that's the reality today in terms of how you are going to become more pragmatic and more sure about your decisions, where intuition along with data helps you take decisions. Because if you today as startup are talking about growths which are unheard of, doubling in a year or whatever, your tried and tested methods are not going to be working for you. And I think that's one important learning that I would also suggest any of the persons who are coming from traditional organizations to startups have to learn. See, there's a lot of craze. There was a lot of craze for startup. In fact, when 2019, uh, when I wanted to move to a startup, because having worked for 10 years, I think there was a lot of learning in Tata Group, etc. And I had to do something different, a bit more, this. And one of the things was HR in startups is very different. I was like, what is different? But it's very different. You don't understand. And I took it to myself, I have to prove that I have to get into a startup world and prove how we can add value out there. And I think the first thing I did was I wrote a article in terms of HR in the startup world, and I learned. But when I joined Uran and I learned it's very different. Okay. In most of the traditional organizations, HR is supposed to be a very, very contextual sensitive function where you end up talking about in shades of gray. Most of the thing you'll never give a straight answer. If you talk to most of the people, it can be, but we'll have to depend and think about it and all of
Very
that.
politically
Right?
correct.
Yeah. In startups, you can't afford to answer that way.
Yeah.
You've got to just figure it out.
Yeah, because if you talk about it from a standpoint, you end up working with techies and engineers. Engineers understand the language of 0 or 1. If you get into this entire ambiguity-based conversations with them, within 2 minutes you have lost them. That was the really thing in terms of how do you put across a point in a particular manner, which you can debate but you can't ignore. So one of the learnings for me was that if I am going to talk about HR initiatives or HR problems, I have to first get it right that I have to talk in a manner which is factual, which means that they have to be spoken in terms of numbers.
Yeah.
Right? Because you may say, okay, this is not important or this is not such a big issue for me, but you can't say this number is wrong or this is not right. So I think that's where I started. That one, make sure that you're talking in terms of data points which cannot be argued from a sense that they are not right or wrong. And then how do you create a story which is linking back to the business? Okay, one of the most interesting thing I did was that in startups, if you look at it, most of the startups, 80% of HR is TA.
Right.
If you're getting the right person, half of your job is done. And I think that was no different in Udan or probably when I joined Gamescraft. And your skill lies in terms of how less significant in the HR value chain you make TA. I'm not saying that TA is not important, it's very important. But today, when I look at it in Gamescraft, I think 20% of our time goes on talent acquisition. And we have tried to solve the problem in a very sustainable fashion.
Right.
Okay.
Right? How are you creating mechanics which are going to solve long-term and short-term problems for you from a hiring standpoint, right? And that's what we ended up doing, because when I took back and I looked at, okay, if I'm going to be, when I came here, we had some 220 positions open.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. Now, in Udan, we had done a lot more hiring, but when I talk about startup, the common notion is that I say startups are two kinds. One is tech-enabled startup, and one is tech startup. Because when you look at a company like a Udan or Swiggy, etc., probably they are tech-enabled, but the kind of people you have is in thousands.
Right.
So they are very people-intensive, because you can have a tech to make sure that you're solving the problem of connect, but last mile delivery still is being done by a human being, right? So you can't take away from that from some of the functions. But in a company like Gamescraft, which are purely product and tech company, you don't have on-ground marketing, on-ground delivery, everything is digital.
Yeah.
So here the hiring challenges are very different from what hiring challenges we had in a company like a
What
Udan,
is that
etc.
one challenge that you have spotted between these two type of startups that you worked for? That one challenge that you thought is very different in both the companies, and how did you deal with that?
Here when we talk about, it's about how you're getting the right tech and product, right? Whereas there it was all about execution efficiency in terms of operational heavy, right? Even if you have the best tech and the best product, if last mile execution is not there, you're not effective. So I think that's what there. So here, one of the things that we understood was that, okay, if I'm going to be looking at Gamescraft, if I'm going to be looking at all of that, what are some of those then non-negotiable talent or supply chain, that supply of talent that I need to have? And we really worked on that in creating a program called Gen G, right? So today, from a hiring standpoint, I don't see have my leaders been worried about the fact that hiring नहीं हो रही है, tech के लोग नहीं है, ups and downs in terms of people leaving us, or probably offers getting dropped, etc. The fact is that we have a steady supply of talent, and we have looked at in terms of the next 1-2 years, how are we looking at our business requirements and getting people, which also gives a lot of comfort to the leaders and to the business that we can today end up doing things. My simple mantra is that today, when business is thinking about expansion and when business is thinking about growth, the last thing that has to be, I mean, we can do it, but we don't have people, right?
You
If that
can't
is
be the
what,
showstopper.
yeah, if you are able to solve that problem, right, sustainably, and then go to the next set of problems in HR, which we often talks about in startups, often get sidelined. I would say deprioritizes that, because if you're not able to serve this, you don't earn the credibility of talking about, let's talk about talent management, let's talk about managerial capability, etc. But then पहले हायर
Hiring
कर
तो
ले,
कर लो. Yeah.
उसको retain करने के बाद में सोचेंगे, because मेरा business is not growing. So I think that becomes a very important thing, and I
So,
think
Nitin, I want to ask you one thing that, freshers are coming up and they are really interested in companies like Gamescraft and more tech companies. What is that one advice you would give to them to be more employable?
there are a certain things that they have to do differently. Some of the things is that they have to learn to fail fast. They have to learn to try to do things that they hate the most, because in organizations, uh, you can't decide this part of the work I will do, this part of the work I will not do, right? And for organization, it becomes very important that you end up creating talent which is multi-skilled, or probably it's far more adaptable, or trainable. That becomes the first thing. One of the other things that I end up telling is that, like, for the first few years, it's all about gaining experience, creating an experience. See, you will see the career trajectories of people changing significantly after 2 or 3 years, right? And that depends upon the skill set that you have acquired. So focus on acquiring the skill set. So I say that focus on gaining skills rather than saying my salary today is 15, it's going to 18 and 20, because that's not going to take you anywhere, because after a certain point of time, it's the
There'll
skill
be
set that,
stagnation.
yeah, because if you have not learned anything, how long can you play around on the fact that, okay, I was on 18, now 20% hike, 20% hike? That doesn't work.
It's a
So
very
that
short-term thing.
and that's what is important to be taught. And the third important thing is that how do you look at creating a goal in terms of where you want to reach, right?
And there's a small observation, and you have to tell me if it has any merit, that the number of engineers that I have dealt in my life, I think they really struggle in terms of writing. Is this there any merit in this observation? Would you have any?
Yes, I think writing brings a lot more clarity to your thinking and the way you articulate. In fact, we also encourage a lot of our techies to write blogs, etc. Because when you write, you become far more clearer in terms of what how you're writing,
Right.
and that gets a lot of clarity in your thinking. So in fact, that becomes very important. That writing is a good skill.
And it's a literary art, so in a way that also enhances a lot of EQ in them, because they're able to express. So I feel writing becomes a very imperative skill for engineers to build in terms of their early careers. That's what I have observed working with
No, you're
few
bang on spot on.
few engineers.
It's very important, and I always believe not only for techies but even for all of us,
For all
because
of us, actually, yeah.
writing is very important. One of the things that I have learned is that probably writing has to change, right? In fact, I remember when I wrote first lengthy, in terms of paragraphs, etc. The point itself is how you convert them into quick bites, because
Yeah.
nobody can today read a one pager, probably 4 5 lines in terms of extracting it out, and that also makes you a bit more sharper and crisper in your articulation. So I think writing as such helps you evolve as a person.
Yeah.
When we were saying that, it just reminded me of that movie Three Idiots कि कहना क्या चाहते हो?
Exactly.
वो बताओ, इतना लंबा लंबा नोट मत दो, कहना क्या चाहते
Oh
हो?
yeah, and it changes. In fact, today everybody is
Knows what's
positive of
going
time,
on. Yeah.
Correct.
right? Unless and until someone asks you, please don't consider that they don't know, because everyone is intelligent.
Yeah.
Everyone comes prepared and they have read.
Yeah.
If you're sharing a notes, they are coming prepared. There's no need for you. So there's a lot of things that we assume, and I used to assume
A
a lot,
lot, yeah.
and that's what I've unlearned after coming
Yeah,
to the
that's a
startup
big one,
world.
because I recall in the earlier organizations where we worked together, I mean, you had to start with context,
Yes.
you had to give a big context and then get into, what you want to say.
Yeah.
So it's a big change.
I have another thing coming up in my mind is that, when tech comes to our mind, usually women are not seen much in the tech world.
Yeah.
Are you hiring actively, in Gamescraft when it comes to women techies, or are you facing any problem?
We are, in fact, as an organization, we always intend that we are a inclusive and a diverse organization. But let's start with the problem itself. Today, if I want to hire more techie women, the point is, if you look at the foundation entry, right, you have less number of women as a general percentage in all the IITs, triple IITs, etc. Hence, it becomes very difficult
The
because
pool is small, you're
it is
saying.
small,
Okay.
right? But I think what we have tried to do in the past few years is that how we are looking at some of those specific women colleges from where we can hire. Because one thing we are very clear, we do not want to fill a particular quota, or we want to say that we want to hire people because this is a good thing to do. If it's making sense and there's no dilution on the hiring yardsticks, because if any woman who's there in Gamescraft, she's there because she's as competent and as good from the yardstick of assessment as their fellow men.
And if there are women techies who are looking to be in this profession and they're currently in schools, if they were to hear this, what is it that you would tell them, that why should they get into the technical world and why should women choose this field?
Let's understand that today diversity of thinking is very important for a growth of the organization and for innovation and creating. And it's been proven that when you have diverse or even women, the way they think is very different.
Very
Their
different.
ability to flex and adapt and think multiple things at the same time is far better. Hence, because many of them are today managing home, office, everything. So it's a very completely different thing. I always end up saying, So the kind of flexibility and thinking they bring actually can help an organization, can help a business. So I think that's very important. But it's equally important for organization to think today that what are they doing to make such choices easy, okay, for a individual, right? Whether it's anyone, right? I think, and that's one part which organizations have to focus in terms of how they are making it happen in a real life for them. For example, into 2022, when we were looking at in terms of what are we going to do, one of the things that we started off with the campaign is break the bias. I mean, giving chocolate on 8th of March with a gift and thank you. I mean, doesn't help because it is something
We
that
both
has
heavily really resonate with this statement of yours.
it's something that what are you doing differently. So one of the things that we spoke about is that okay, men and women are biologically very different. I think there are times. So we started off with the wellness sleep. I think this is the thing that we are doing. There's no question asked. I mean, good, bad, ugly, those are the 2 days you can take off without giving any reason, and this is something that you are not even supposed to take a permission from or an approval from your line manager. Now, one of the other thing that probably we are contemplating and thinking about is that we expect women to be or women are career oriented, and if they are career oriented, how can you help? Because today, let's understand that if I am at the peak of my career at the age of 29, 30, 31, from a family's perspective, if I have to look at something in terms of a child, etc., probably is it something that you can manage at the peak of the career? And very often we have seen these are the debates that end up happening.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that we are thinking about is can an organization do something about it, right?
Yeah.
It's just a thinking that we are having right now, and I'm just we as a team are thinking about it. But I think the very fact that you as an organization are acknowledging
Yeah.
and giving importance to these aspects is very important for them to be feeling valued or comfortable in terms of pursuing the career out there.
Is there any program or any skill that you think women need differently or additional to what men know?
As a games craft, the marketing for our rummy business and for poker business has been headed by women.
Oh,
Okay,
nice.
it was not that it happened by design. It just came out to happening, and one day I was talking about it and I was like, "Arey, look, we have two women who are holding the marketing for both our brands, and we believe that every individual, every crafter who's committed, who's this, will get and find their path. For example, our design head is again and Shrishta, who's is a woman. In fact, we have some of the other fellow crafters who are doing pretty well in tech, and they're women.
So, Gamescraft is a highly tech company. Are you guys open to your hybrid model, or are you getting all your employees back to the office? How does it work for you guys now?
Very interesting question, because this normally comes that as a tech company, work from home hybrid is the reality.
Work from the beach. Why home?
Yes, many companies, in fact, have ended up talking about we means once a quarter, and we have drinks and we dance together and we have fun, and yeah, you go back and then start working.
Yeah.
And Shikha and Priyanka, you spoke about something known as culture, institution
Yes.
growth. And I have been thinking in terms, if you're talking of building a culture, if you're talking about building an organization into an institution, and you're talking about employee growth, how can this happen when learning and collaboration is not happening? Right? And learning and collaboration doesn't
What about the
happen.
Gen Z who says, "Oh, we'll learn together online and we'll
It
connect"?
doesn't okay. So I think, but the point itself is that are you able to put that in the right perspective to the people? Gamescraft was one of the first companies way back in 2022 who announced coming back to office. Okay, we do have a hybrid, and I'm going to talk about it, but it's important for you to be based out of the home location or base location and come to office. Now, reason was very simple. Today, none of the young Gen Z you end up talking about that please attend a 3-day classroom training. They will say, we can't attend this training. How are you ensuring they're learning? Learning happens through cross functional ideas, discussions, and all of that.
Interactions.
That becomes an important way of people learning.
Right.
And half of it is not possible if it is not happening in physical ambience.
In person.
Right?
Right.
So it becomes very important that how are you equipping a crafter to grow for future? And are they seeing a merit in that? Right? First thing, it becomes this. Second, the speed of execution. Right? Today, if you have to collaborate, one of the problems that startups have is that most of them are vertically aligned. Hence, collaboration becomes a key issue to be solved. Hybrid makes it far more difficult. It's a very different thing when you're saying that we all were remote and we all were operating from home. It was a level playing field. Today, let me tell you, in reality, and I would like you to think about it as you have any hybrid meeting where 5 people are in the room and 3 people are on Google Meet. You will have to force yourself and be reminded that, okay, let me ask, do you have any questions? Do you have
Yes.
anything to say? Because
Becomes very
they're
challenging.
not actively participating.
So, Nitin, I'm with you because I'm somebody who hosts a lot of online trainings with a lot of companies, which are, according to me, has not more than 5% of success rate versus an in-person learning and development initiative where the outcome will be 90-95%. That's the gap. And I totally am with you that in-person impact in terms of building culture, giving the learning and development opportunities, all of that comes when we are together in person with each other, And this interview is a very big example that if we were doing this online, we
How
would have
interesting
been,
would that be?
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have enjoyed this conversation as much as I'm doing right now. I'm sure it's the same for you, Priyanka, right?
Absolutely.
And just to Shikha say that, not that I'm saying this because I have to say this, I think the data also proves that we have a hybrid culture where 5 days in a day, in a month, you can actually work from home. And in fact, I've been reviewing that data. The actual work from home is not more than 2.5 days at an org level, which means that even if the option is available, the people are choosing to come to work. Now, that's a good thing. So, we'll have to understand that whenever such choices are to be made, whenever such discussions or narratives are built, how are you able to explain and people are going to see the benefit of it?
Right.
If I'm going to talk about it, it means this for us and you will be learning, and actual on ground, it is not creating that impact. People will stop believing in what you're saying.
Yes.
So it becomes very important. And this data proves for us that, okay, despite 5 days, if people are coming for more than, required days, it is something that they are finding merit in what they are doing.
Right.
The other thing that people end up talking about is work from home. You're able to be more productive. You're not spending time or wasting time in traffic, etc. But there is always a cost benefit analysis in terms of what you're losing and what you're gaining out of that
Exactly.
1 hour that you're spending in terms of
With
traffic.
your
Traveling.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And other aspect becomes culture. Because today some of this may become relevant in some of the economies outside India, but we as Indians also work in a particular setup, culture, and style. It becomes very important to be cognizant of that. So anything that works in West may not work or needs some adaptation to be working in our kind of setup.
Right.
I'll give you an example of the fact that if today you end up talking, or most of us when we were young, or probably today you end up getting something done from a young aspiring talent, how much work rework is required? Imagine trying to manage that online where the person sends the PPT, you work on it and sends it again, explain the person, and
Such a pain.
It's
It
a pain.
happens. I mean, it's such a pain.
Lose so much time. Where does the agility go then?
Yeah, and work roles are no longer defined, right?
Yeah.
Today, what I expect from a team or what I expect from a particular role becomes very different. It's more fluid, right? So on one side, we are saying that the external environment is ambiguous. Your goalposts keep on changing. There's no need for you to have KRAs as a part of performance management. One side, you're talking this. All of that, if it's connected, it's actually, very difficult for you to say that hybrid will work for roles which are not clearly defined, scope keeps on evolving, and you are dependent on a lot of people to get the work done. So I think in that context, it may not work.
So, Nitin, we have a rapid fire round for you. I'm going to give you first question. So, what is that one thing that techies should get it right? I know it's tricky.
Uh, Salary is an outcome,
Okay.
right?
Okay. The second one, okay. So, which book would you recommend to freshers or to, some youngsters?
By far, Blink.
Okay, Blink. What's your favorite quote, if any, if at all you have any?
When the going gets tough, tough gets going.
Awesome.
And what's your leadership style?
Hands on.
All right. I get it. I know you. So, yes, I agree. And what would you prefer? You worked in both sides of the organization, startup versus traditional. Which one do you prefer?
Startup.
Oh,
But how do you build them as an institution? I always get there in terms of can
Yeah.
you build an institution? But yeah, startup.
Startup, otherwise, yes. And what to you, according to you, is happiness at the workplace?
I always think if you are able to create an impact and it impacts you, you are happy.
And personally to you, if you take away work, what does happiness mean personally?
Satisfaction, which I
Okay.
think if you're able to get, I think it's important.
Okay.
awesome. So, Nitin,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for coming on Office Tales and People podcast. We really loved talking to you. It was so
Same
much
here.
fun and so much learning. So, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time, Nitin, and look forward to more conversations in the
Yeah,
future.
sure.
So, thank you so much for watching Office Tales and People podcast. And this was Nitin from Gamescraft for you. And for more episodes, please sign up on YouTube, Office Tales and People podcast, and do share this OTP with everyone.
Thanks for joining us. See you soon.